Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the boreal forest of northern Ontario, Canada. The topography consists of flat woodscapes covered in dense forests of a mix of pine and fir trees, maple, poplar, ash, and oak trees. The elevation of this area averages at about 1,000 feet above sea level, and the subarctic climate means that winters are cold and snowy, and summers are hot and rainy. In winter, this area receives an average of 117 inches of snowfall, and seasonal temperatures range from -30 in the winter to nearly 100 in the summer months. Wildlife in the area range from beautiful birds like blue jay to eagles and owls, with white-tailed deer and moose being the primary food source for timber wolves, lynx, fox, and black bears of the area. Notice I said primary food source. This would be an indication that there may be a secondary food source for some of these animals. On May 11, 2013, 30-year-old tech entrepreneur Joe Azougar was just finishing up cooking breakfast at his remote off-grid 8x16 cabin located about 10 miles south of the town of Cochrane. Joe grabbed his plate and headed out to his front porch with his German Shepard Ace for a meal while basking in the peace of his yard. Joe's brother bred German Shepherds and told Joe that he would need a large protective dog up there, so 2 days prior he brought one up for him. As Joe settled in with his breakfast plate, Ace lay down beside him and stared into the trees. Ace wasn't wound up or upset and seemed to be relaxing as much as Joe. Suddenly there was a thump, and the ground vibrated. Joe looked over to see a massive black bear break from cover very near his cabin and streak toward him and Ace. It may have been part instinct, but Ace was trained to protect, and he met the bear about halfway across the short yard. The two animals growled and thumped in a frenzy of teeth and fur for several minutes as Joe clanged pots and pans together to try to scare the bear away. Joe called a friend of his to tell him what's going on and watched the bear and dog square off. The bear got the best of Ace, and Joe heard his dog howl and bark and watched as the bear killed Ace and dragged him off into the bush. Joe stared in stunned sadness for a few minutes, unsure of what to do now, but he looked up to see the bear returning at full speed. The bear made a beeline for the small window on the back of the cabin. The bear easily shattered the glass in the window and shredded the blinds. It then rolled itself through the window and seemed to grow as he spilled onto the floor just a few feet from Joe. Joe ran through the front door and away from the bear as fast as he could, slamming the door closed behind him. As he ran, he looked over his shoulder, and the bear was already through the door somehow and right on his heels. As Joe fled, the bear ran clear around him and slammed him into the ditch. The 400-pound predator wasted no time and immediately started peeling Joe's scalp from his skull. Joe shrieked in pain and cried out to God not to let him die this way. Just then the bear slowed down for a moment, and that allowed Joe to curl into a ball to protect his neck and head. Since the bear now only had easy access to Joe's shoulder, he started chewing on that. The bear bit into a chunk of flesh near Joe's armpit and pulled, and then did the same thing on his shoulder. He continued to bite and pull and tried to roll Joe over onto his back, but Joe resisted. As the two fought, Joe jammed his thumb into the bear's eye, but the bear didn't even react and continued to bite him. The weight and strength of the bear was so overwhelming that Joe related the attack to being bolted to the ground. The stench of the bear reeked like something dead and rotten. Time seemed to slow down as the bear searched for a weak spot in Joe's defenses to attack. The bear clearly wanted to get at Joe's stomach area, as it continually bit and pulled him in an attempt to flip him. Joe knew that if the bear could get to his belly, it would tear his guts out, so he continued to fight to maintain his defensive position. As the bear continually shifted its attack from Joe's shoulder to his skull, then back to his side, he could see the bear's face covered in blood, and wasn't sure if the blood belonged to Ace or him. The bear returned to Joe's head, and Joe could hear the bear's teeth grating along his skull as it made a sound. Joe could feel the bear trying to get his skull inside of its mouth. At that point, Joe's lost a lot of blood from several bites all over his upper body, and adrenaline and blood loss are starting to wear him down. Just a few minutes before, sisters Denise Didon and Louise Sequin were driving down a bush road near Joe's cabin on a Mother's Day getaway. They were staying with friends at a nearby location and had decided to run to the nearby town of Cochrane to fetch some supplies. Louise glanced over and saw a huge black bear. She reached over, grabbed her sister's leg, and said, "Look, a bear." The women watched as the bear was standing over something that was obscured to them and was thrashing about. Denise thought that Joe was a trash bag and the bear was ripping into it to eat something inside. Then they saw Joe's leg protruding from underneath the bear. Denise yelled at her sister to hit the horn, and the two women turned onto the road and approached the scene. The bear was scared away by the horn and the approaching vehicle. The sisters yelled at Joe to get into their van, and Joe stumbled to his feet. Joe collapsed back to the ground, and the sisters knew they were too small to help such a large man into their van. The trio cooperated enough to get him inside, and the sisters saw what terrible condition the bear had left Joe in. His scalp was hanging from his head, and his shoulder was bitten and torn up with blood seeping from puncture wounds and gashes all over it. His clothes had been shredded and torn from his body as well. They drove him straight to Lady Minto Hospital for emergency medical care. Doctors sewed up Joe's wounds with 300 stitches after cleaning them. As soon as the morphine kicked in, Joe started to smile, and the sisters knew he'd be just fine. The sisters returned to their campmates and worried about Joe over the next few days. After they could see he was recovering, they began to feel relieved about the events. When people addressed them as heroes, the sisters eschewed the accolades and insisted they didn't fight the bear, but merely pulled up close enough to scare it off, and would have done the same thing for anyone in this predicament. Joe calls them his angels. When asked what he planned to do after he's released from the hospital, Joe stated he would make sure to upgrade the security features at his cabin, just in case any bears came back. He also planned to get some firearms and bear spray. Joe says this will not stop him from enjoying the outdoors. The bear that killed Ace and a few of Joe's chickens, as well as nearly killed Joe, was killed by local authorities. It took several shots, but the bear was eventually tracked down using a helicopter. I could find no sources indicating the condition of the bear, whether it was diseased or of ill health. Joe will have to endure years of physical therapy, and when asked about human perceptions of bear attacks, states that people still think bear attacks don't happen. He urges people to just Google it, and you'll be surprised. Ontario currently has black bear hunting season, though bear numbers are stated to be over 75,000. The Ministry of Natural Resources offer Be Bear Aware courses to hikers and campers. A few questions I am left with are, was the bear rabid or in a state of poor health? Did the bear attack because Joe's cabin was suddenly introduced to its environment or because it smelled the food? Why didn't it stop once it had the body of Ace to eat? Was this attack a territorial attack? Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. This week's episode takes us to my family cabin in central Idaho, just about 20 miles south of one of the largest wilderness areas in the lower 48, the Frank Church Wilderness Area. Yes, this event happened to me and my family. This area is 1 mile high in elevation and consists of steep, decomposed granite mountains covered in pine, fir, and a mix of willow, alder, buckbrush, as well as various berry bushes. It was the month of April 2009, and Boise County of central Idaho had received several times the amount of typical rainfall. It was almost like you could watch the Payette River set a new high water mark each time you entered on the old wooden bridge. Make no mistake, it was beautiful. Everything was green, and the clouds rolling across the sky dimmed the light just enough you didn't even have to squint to take it all in. My family had a terrible time due to the real estate crash. We lost our business, 4 rental houses, and our primary house as well. We also lost our 2 family cars and just about everything useful to help us recover. In fact, I believe the bankruptcy cutoff mandated we forfeit anything worth more than $500 of liquidated value. All we had was each other. My wife Xandra and I decided to move ourselves and our 2 sons, Ezra and Azariah, to the family cabin to complete construction on the halfway done building. The walls were 7 1/4-inch D logs on the first floor, then the upper floor was framed out of attic trusses, creating 2 bedrooms that only had the floors installed, no walls yet. I struck a deal with my dad that if I finished the cabin, he would buy the materials, and we could live there until we could get better jobs. Xandra's parents had let us borrow their RV, which we parked up the hill overlooking the cabin, and I would go down and work all day. The morning of April 20th was wet and cold, as I made my way through the buckbrush and down the hill toward the day's labor. As I approached the cabin, I could see a complete disaster. In front of the cabin, we had erected a small tarp shelter to stash our tools under, since we had not built a garage. There were wrappers and tools scattered all over the place. I looked at the bottom of a bookcase I was using as an improvised tool shelf, and the tubes of spray foam sealant all had holes in the bottom of each can. Down below that was a large ball of foam with my drill, my hammer, and a few random tools and items embedded in it. The first thing I thought of was, wow, my friends drove all the way up here just to prank me, but that's not what happened. I started looking around at the other items under the shelter. A large bag of dog food had been laid flat on the ground with a near-perfect X cut through the top of it and had it pulled back. None of it seemed missing. There was a 12-pack of Dr. Pepper soda, which every single can had been punctured and probably consumed if not dumped out on the ground. The 12-pack of Diet Pepsi was nearly untouched. The bag of potatoes was knocked on the ground but not otherwise bothered. The bag of apples that was on top of the bookcase was missing. Apples, bag, and all. The 2-gallon boreal container for my chainsaw was pierced full of holes and completely empty as well. After taking in all this chaos and realizing it had occurred only about 100 yards from where my family and I had just slept, ate breakfast, and played, unnerved me a bit. I decided to clean up and put a stop to this right away. I raked up all of the debris and put it in the burn barrel we burned trash in and moved it about 80 yards down the road. I scooped up the dog food and broadcast the waste down the hill to try to spread out the smell. I moved all the other food into the building and emptied the trash, which was filled with dirty diapers, rotten milk cartons, and paper plates rinsed of the syrup from breakfast pancakes a few days prior. Combine all of that with the record amount of rainfall, and we had inadvertently created a bear bait at our front door. That day I worked hard on the plumbing and electrical wiring, but my mind continued to wonder about the bear. Around lunchtime I decided to knock off and eat with my family. I went outside and noticed that the white 275-gallon IBC tank had a big smear on the side of it. I walked over to it and observed a large bear paw print, perfectly placed, about 4 feet off the ground. It was big. I took out my tape measure and measured it. It was about 6.5 inches across. If you've ever had that feeling that someone is watching you, and you look up and someone is staring at you from across the room, then you will know the feeling I had the rest of the day. I would stop and look over the brushy hillside, but I didn't notice anything strange. I finished the work for the day early and went up to help prepare dinner and get the boys ready for bed. After dinner, around 7 p.m., I couldn't shake that feeling again, and I thought I would pacify my nerves. I told Xandra to wait here with the boys, and I'm going to go look outside. I walked over to the edge of the small hill and looked down toward the cabin. The area was mostly elderberry bushes and buckbrush, but had some big pines and fir trees mixed in. I stared at the open door of the cabin for probably about 10 minutes, just wondering if the bear would be back that night, and second-guessing leaving my .300 Winchester Magnum hunting rifle in the cabin while I ate. Just as I started to feel like it was all fine and well, I heard a loud bonk, and the bear ran down the hill from the cabin into a small clearing. He'd been right in front of me the whole time, and I was practically staring right at him. He'd knocked over the wood splitter and startled himself. Right when I saw him and how close he was to my family, I could feel this sort of anger welling up in me. I started yelling at him to go away and get out of here. He responded by standing on his hind legs and staring at me. Xandra came running out to see what I was yelling at. I told her to wait right there and keep an eye on the bear as I headed down the hill to the cabin to get my rifle. I would start down the hill, and the bear would hear me rustling in the bushes and start coming toward me to investigate. Xandra would yell at me to get back up because the bear was coming toward me, and I would scramble my way back up the hill to get a visual on him again. The bear would then return back to his clearing and stand on his hind legs again to see me as well. This went on about 3 times before I figured he was going to continue to do this, and I went back to yelling at him. As I watched him from my elevated perspective, he walked over to the decomposed granite hill my kids played on with their toy trucks. I watched him as he went from item to item, sniffing where I placed my hands on my shovel, smelling the toy dump truck and the other toys my sons were playing with earlier. I thought to myself, this son of a bitch is indexing my whole family. I watched him slip through the trees hidden by shadows from the spotlight as he walked right inside my cabin. After about 2 hours of this, with 1 hour of that under the spotlight, I finally decided to drive down there and make sure he was gone. The road to the cabin winds about 1 mile around the hill in nearly a circle. As I pulled up, I could see the open cabin door, but wasn't sure where the bear had gone. It was pitch black, and I started to get out of my truck to close the cabin door, but what if the bear was inside? I would be shutting him in, and then he would wreck the place trying to get out. And if I went in there to get my rifle, I might run into him. I decided the bear had won this battle of wits. I retreated back up the hill to my RV, unarmed and irritated that I had been outsmarted. The next day I walked back down the hill to see what had occurred overnight. I walked through the cabin just to make sure he wasn't still in there. I made sure to grab my rifle this time. He was gone, and I resumed work. At lunchtime, I told Xander that I wanted us to sleep in the cabin that night, just in case he came back. We made the proper sleeping arrangements and moved in right after dinner time. She slept up on the queen mattress with the boys, and I slept on the floor with my rifle. The rain played a tempo on the metal roof, and the off-grid cabin was devoid of any other noise. No electric buzz of gadgets, refrigerators, or appliances. Just the rhythmic patter of rain and metered drops in puddles from the roof. It wasn't long before we were all sleeping. I have a strange ability to listen while I sleep, and just after midnight I heard a distant bonk. I grabbed my rifle and stood up to investigate. Xandra asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "The bear's here. I heard him tip over the burn barrel down the road." She was too tired to consider the situation and objected as I crept through the darkness to the window at the other end of the upstairs. The moon was full and lit up the entire area, and the land was thinly veiled by the ground fog that floated just above it. I could see the bear with his head in the burn barrel about 80 yards from me. I pulled open the spring-loaded window and held it open with my left hand, while it also grasped the flashlight and stabilized my rifle while I was aiming. The bear pulled his head from the burn barrel, and the full moon highlighted his ears. I aimed right between his ears and pulled the trigger. This awkward shooting position ended with me gashing my nose open with a scope ring on the back of the gun and completely losing sight of the bear after I shot. I wiped the blood from my nose as I flashed the light around the bush, looking for eye shine. I stayed there and looked for several minutes, and I couldn't find him, nor had I heard him run off through the bushes. If I hit him, I knew where he would be in the morning. I went back to bed. Not more than an hour later, I hear something big being dragged across the plywood floor below us. The bear was inside the cabin. I jumped up and grabbed my gun and assumed the flashlight holding the rifle position from earlier and cleared the cabin in the dark. Each room I cleared, I concluded he had to be in the next room, but he wasn't. Perplexed, I went back upstairs and tried to go back to sleep. After about 30 more minutes, I could hear a noise like a dog scratching on the metal door. I grabbed my rifle and headed back to the second-floor window I shot from earlier and flashed the flashlight around. Nothing. I just heard him scratching on that door like a dog who wanted to be let in. I again surveyed the area for eye shine, but nothing. As soon as I laid down, I began drifting off to sleep again, but was awakened again by a noise from him moving something around outside this time. By this point, I was too tired and just banged on the framing of the building and yelled at him. I could hear him run off. This cycle repeated itself every 30 minutes or so until about 5:30 a.m. I decided to go downstairs and figure out what the big object I heard moving across the floor was. When you build a log cabin, an easy way to keep your building secure while marking out your windows is to skip every other log row where your windows are going to be. It leaves a series of parallel openings in your wall that permits light and air to come in, but nothing very big. By looking at the bear tracks outside and the scratches on the logs, I could see that the bear had reached into the window and pulled down a coat we had hanging on a nail. He knocked down a can of peanut butter and accidentally snagged a small wheeled office chair. That was the noise I heard in the night. For the next few days, I would work and look around, keeping a careful eye on my sons playing in the granite face. All the while, I had this eerie feeling that we were being watched, even though I had no proof. After getting a few good looks at this bear, I was left with the impression that he was what I called a dork bear. He was probably kicked out of the den by his mom and chased out of the better bear claims by more mature males. So he decided our unintentional bear bait was a great invitation to stake out a new territorial claim. I estimated he weighed about 250 pounds, but Xandra said he was much larger than I am when I stood in the same place she saw him. I weigh about 350 pounds, so that would make him 500 pounds. I'm pretty sure she was just excited, and it made him seem larger. I spoke with my neighbor Dick, the man who owns the chalet up the hill. He said the bear had torn off his wellhead cover. Otto from down the hill said that the bear had cut open his screen porch to eat the cat's food. It was bear season, but I decided to call the Idaho Fish and Game to see if they could trap him and move him somewhere that he could be a bear instead of a pet. It took a few days, and the game warden showed up towing a huge culvert trap. He parked it on my driveway, and he baited it with a small amount of fish and blood and set the spring-loaded door, warning me to keep my kids away from it because it could cut off an arm. Xandra had had enough of the Idaho woods and begged some of our friends in Boise to let us stay with them until we found an apartment. That little dork bear outsmarted that game warden for the rest of the summer, and he never did catch him. We found out later that the bear was sleeping about 100 yards from my cabin under my neighbor's deck. I was told by the same neighbor that the bear was shot by some hunters a few years later, a bit further up the valley. Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the stormy and challenging environs of Kodiak Island, just off of Alaska's central coast. There is a ridge of mountains that divides Kodiak Island, creating remote and isolating places for giant bears to grow without interference from people. The city of Kodiak is located on the far eastern end of the island and has some modern amenities there. It is a growing town and a difficult place to grow. About 10 miles southwest of town is a rural development along Bell's Flats Road near Woman's Bay. This small collection of houses are set out on a series of acreages, granting neighbors privacy and seclusion. Meanwhile, just outside all of their front doors, Kodiak bears fish, hunt, browse, and carry on with their normal lives among the alder bushes that cover this area. Chris Heilman was an officer on the Coast Guard's tactical law enforcement team while serving in Miami, Florida. While visiting Kodiak in 2013, he promised himself that he would retire here, and shortly thereafter fulfilled that promise. It is the smallest of small towns, featuring one restaurant and one little store. It is the kind of place where, when you eat out, you certainly can't afford to complain if you don't like the food or service. Heilman states that living in Alaska, you have to get used to bears. You don't just walk blindly toward your vehicle when heading to work in the morning. Here, you open the door and look around before departing. This is the kind of environment that living close to bears, particularly giant bears, fosters in residents' minds. Walking around a corner and surprising a bear is a resident's greatest worry. Heilman says that if you put a brisket in the smoker and wheel it into your garage, the giant bears on Kodiak Island will rip your entire garage door off to get at it. During a stormy night on September 27, 2022, Aaron Olson had begun to doze off from a hard day's work. He and his family lived 5 doors down from Chris Heilman's house on Bell's Flat Road. He typically went to bed around midnight, but by 10 was nodding off on the couch. Maribel, his pregnant wife, and 5 of his 6 kids were already asleep in their beds. His typical routine, locking all the doors and turning on the porch lights before heading up to bed, but this time he was too groggy. He stumbled his way upstairs and collapsed in his bed. As Aaron slumbered, the winds whipped up and roared outside. The pounding rain created a background of white noise that would hide nearly any unusual sounds. The moon wasn't shining, and the cloud cover limited what light it showed. It was a very typical fall night on the windswept island. As Aaron slept around 11 p.m., the family dog, Harley, let out a very distinct bark that is long and intense. It is a bark that Aaron knows well, as it is Harley's way of telling him there is a bear nearby. Aaron knew better than to ignore this particular bark from Harley. He leapt to his feet and grabbed his home defense pistol. It was a Taurus Judge, which is a revolver which allows the user to load either 410 shotgun ammo or 45 revolver pistol ammunition in it. It was designed to be used against varmints, but has the versatility to be used for home defense as well, although neither would be great to use against a giant Kodiak bear. Aaron thought that the bear was on his porch, so with his pistol in hand stealthily crept through his house in his underwear toward the porch area. Harley was still bellowing his bear alarm as Aaron approached the door of the porch. It was so dark outside that he couldn't see anything, and he wasn't about to open the door to check. As he considered his options, he could hear Maribel say, "Baby, there is a bear," from their bedroom. As he turned to look at the bedroom door he had just walked through, his vision was filled with one of the most massive brown bears he had ever seen. The bear was smelling the air coming from Aaron's bedroom and staring down Maribel. To get to where the bear was, he would have had to walk in through the front door, through the living room and kitchen, walk right past the fried chicken leftovers on the counter, and stop in front of the washing machine. As it entered, it had somehow bumped the front door closed behind it, preventing it from departing. This bear had crossed too many lines for Aaron to do anything but shoot it. He knew he had to take a good shot on the bear and couldn't afford to miss with so many of his family members in the house. 2 of his children were sleeping just around the corner from where the bear was now standing, making Aaron's decision complicated, to say the least. As Aaron began to squeeze the trigger, he aimed at the bear's shoulder but couldn't see its head. This bear was out of scale in the hallway of Aaron's family home, but somehow managed to turn around and try to get out the same way it came in. It headed back toward the front door, with Aaron and his pistol right behind it. Like some scene out of a Western movie, Aaron followed the bear while firing his pistol at it. He not only assailed the bear with bullets, but with cuss words, and he yelled at it to get out of his house. He states he was not afraid at this point, just extremely angry. The giant bear had fled back along its initial path and had entered the Arctic entry to the home. This is basically a room separated from the outside entrance to give a buffer from outside temperatures entering the home. Most families put coats, shoes, or other storage goods there. The bear was stuck in a room measuring 8 feet by 8 feet, which either dimension was smaller than the bear on all fours. Aaron could hear the bear trying to turn around in the entryway, knocking items from the wall and trying to escape. 3 of the 4 bullets fired by Aaron's judge had hit the bear, but were not fatal. The gun simply isn't powerful enough to bring a giant brown bear down quickly. Aaron held back on firing the 1 remaining round in his pistol. He knew these giant bears could be unpredictable, especially when trapped and injured. He could hear the bear loudly breathing as it searched for an escape route. The bear was so upset at being trapped in Aaron's home, it had purged its bowels, which is a common sign of distress in bears, and animals in particular. 2 of Aaron's girls were awake but still in their beds. They could hear their father yelling at them to stay in their bedroom in the heavy breathing of the trapped bear. It was apparent to Aaron that the bear was scared, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't react violently to any assistance he offered to it to flee. Meanwhile, Maribel had called 911 to get some armed backup for Aaron. Their son Jamie called his grandpa, whose home was only 200 yards away. Jamie's older brother was staying with Grandpa, and they showed up to pull the other 5 Olsen kids through the bedroom windows to the safety of Grandpa's house. As Aaron kept an eye on the massive bear and listened to it thrashing about, he could feel himself start to fade out a bit. He was still unsure if everyone was safely out of the home, and the officer was still about 15 minutes away. Back in the Heilman home, the phone rang. Chris's wife had picked it up and had listened as a concerned neighbor relayed the predicament of the Olsen family nearby. It turned out that one of Chris's friends was responding to the 911 call and decided to request his help. His wife had called Chris's wife because she didn't want her husband to respond alone, so Chris was woken up to assist. Chris had his Remington 870 tactical shotgun nearby and filled his pockets with Winchester XP 1-ounce copper sabot slugs. These slugs have about 2,489 foot-pounds of energy when they leave the muzzle, which is enough to bring down any animal in North America. As Chris approached the Olsen's front door, he could see the bear through the window. Its head was moving up and down as if it was licking itself, perhaps nursing its wounds from Aaron's pistol. Chris was trained to breach as part of his Coast Guard police training and would now be putting it to good use. His main concern was if his bullet might travel into the home and possibly injure one of the family members. Chris had decided that he could shoot the bear in the head once its head dipped down below the window section of the door. He stood about 10 feet from the door and watched as the bear's massive head bobbed up and down. At what he thought would be the perfect time, Chris squeezed the trigger, sending one of the slugs through the door. The Olsen house shuddered as the slug ripped through the door. The well-timed and placed slug hit the bear beneath its jaw and went straight through its brain. It instantly killed the bear. Chris and his friend crept up and shined the flashlight through the Olsen's door to examine the bear. It was motionless, but they knew they were not about to walk up on it any time soon. The alternative was to go around and enter the back door, but they would then be in the same room with the injured bear. It was clearly better to stay in the wind and rain and observe the bear for any sign of life. Now some time had elapsed and the bear was clearly dead. The men entered the Olsen home. The place reeked of bear scat and stench. As the bear had wandered the hallways, it had rubbed blood, mud, and feces all over any surface it touched. The bear scat had been stomped into the carpet and covered nearly every bit of the room. The 4 men tried to move the bear and did manage to pull it back away from the door. Realizing the bear was simply too massive to move from the house, they got creative. They contacted a tow truck service who used the cable winch on the truck to drag the bear from the house. These pictures will not pass the YouTube guidelines, so I have uploaded pictures of this gigantic bear and the scene from the house to my Patreon account, linked below.
but I do warn you, some viewers may find them offensive or troubling. The tow truck driver winched the bear carcass all the way up onto the bed and drove it over to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. In Alaska, when a bear destroys property or threatens livelihood or life whenever it is killed, it belongs to the state. That includes the hide, claws, teeth, and meat. The person who kills the bear is required by law to surrender its complete carcass. Once the Fish and Game officers got a chance to look the bear's carcass over, they determined that the bear weighed in at 988 pounds. To assess the trophy qualifications for bears, judges use a measurement of the bear's skull. This bear's skull measured 27 inches, which was nearly record book-sized. Being grateful that the Olson family was safe, the cleanup of the bear's blood, feces, and mud seemed to be a very minor penalty compared to what could have happened. Aaron stated that the bear seemed sort of graceful while in the home, given he didn't even knock a picture off the wall. Apparently the adrenaline involved in this bear encounter did something to Aaron, as he now plans to go bear hunting and get a bearskin rug. He has purchased a 12-gauge Benelli M4 shotgun and registered as a bear hunter. He says he doesn't want to hunt bears in his living room ever again, especially since he had to surrender the hide. Now he plans to adorn his living room with a bear hide taken from the woods. It is estimated that there are 3,500 brown bears living on Kodiak Island. There are about 180 brown bears harvested on Kodiak Island each year. Over the past 75 years, there has been only one fatal bear attack on Kodiak Island. After reviewing the details of this incident, I am left with a few questions for you. Do you think that the bear would have left on its own if it hadn't bumped the front door shut on itself? Why do you think there are so few human fatalities from bear attacks on Kodiak Island? Did you look at the pictures of the massive bear on Patreon? How do you think you could escape such a creature? I look forward to reading your responses, so please post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it.
Today's episode takes us to the scenic Taylor County in northern Wisconsin, to the town of Medford. With only 20,633 people in all of Taylor County and 4,285 people in Medford, this area is vintage, small-town America. To the south of the town, farmland sprawls and produces snap peas, potatoes, carrots, and sweet corn. On the plentiful orchards around the area, the top products are cherries, apples, nuts, and cranberries. The state of Wisconsin is one of the top states for producing dairy products and boasts over 600 different cheeses. Just about 5 miles north of Medford, the surrounding area is host to the Mondo Hardwood State Natural Area, a sort of state park set apart for the preservation of natural ecologies. To the west of that is the Kidrick State Swamp Natural Area, a mix of swampy woods, ponds, lakes, and streams. A diverse set of wildlife species call this area home and include white-tailed deer, coyotes, foxes, cougar, elk, and even wolves. This area is just about as wild as it gets. Just north of Medford, a family is settling in for the night. To protect the anonymity of the family, we will be calling the couple Dave and Deborah. The children were put to bed for the evening, and Dave and Deborah were beginning to unwind from the day. They enjoyed watching the birds eat from their bird feeder in the backyard, but this evening they could hear something unusual back there. As they peered into the darkness, they flipped the back porch light on and see the eyeshine of 4 eyes glowing back at them. It takes their eyes a moment to adapt to the darkness, but within a few seconds, they can make out the shape of a large bear and a small bear. They are looking at a sow black bear and her cub raiding their bird feeder. Dave and Deborah aren't too concerned at the sight, but they paid good money for those bird feeders and didn't want them damaged. Dave begins to yell through the open window at the bears. He tells them to go away and get out of here. As soon as he begins yelling, the sow's head quickly turns toward him. His voice alarms her, as she was unaware of any human presence. Her cub immediately runs for the bushes nearby, and the sow charges toward Dave's voice coming from the window. It's hard to make out what's going on as he looks through the window in the darkness, but Dave thinks he can make out the shape of a bear moving quickly toward him, and he can hear the grunting and growling as she comes. Suddenly he sees the dark figure emerge into the window frame from which he's yelling. Before he could even process what's going on, the bear is coming through the window after him. Dave is completely terrified as the large bear is now inside of his home and biting and clawing at him. Dave is yelling and trying to fight back when Deborah begins yelling and trying to run the bear off and back out of their house. Dave grabs a kitchen knife and tries to stab the bear in a vital area. He gets in a few good jabs, but the bear continues her attack and is now biting and clawing at Deborah. Dave is now becoming more desperate as he runs through the house to get his gun. As he grabs it and runs back toward the bear, which is now entering the hallway leading to their children's bedroom, Dave takes careful aim and dispatches the Bruin before it can get any further down the hallway. Dave and Deborah have numerous bites and claw marks on their bodies and call authorities to the scene for assistance. Both of them fought valiantly and suffered moderate injuries, which were treated at the hospital. The exact number of bites on their bodies was not released, but is reported to be several. The Taylor County Sheriff's Office responds to the call for help and documents the occurrence. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources takes possession of the bear's carcass for analysis. Bear attacks in Wisconsin are rare, but a home invasion from a black bear is nearly non-existent. In 1989, Wisconsin was reported to have 9,000 black bears, but today that number exceeds 24,000 black bears. As forest and habitat are developed, that increases pressure on the bears, especially sows with cubs, to find resources for survival. The state of Wisconsin does have a bear hunting season, which is a little over a month long and runs from mid-September to mid-October most years. Most hunting zones have a quota system to help stabilize populations, but as bears are pushed into areas occupied by people and out of ideal habitat through competition, bear populations will have to be decreased to avoid further conflict. Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.